All right, everybody. The president just came out several minutes ago, and he gives his introduction, and then Secretary of Treasury Steve Mnuchin comes up and begins to take some questions. So let's just jump right into it. Mr. President, what we got?
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Got a very big day today. I want to start by saying that our love and prayers of every American continue to be with our fellow citizens who have lost a cherished friend or family member to the virus. Amidst our grief, we're making tremendous strides against this invisible enemy, thanks to our aggressive campaign against the virus and the extraordinary talent of our medical professionals. Our mortality rate remains roughly half of that of many other countries, and one of the lowest of any country in the world. And that's due to a lot of things, but our medical professionals have been incredible. Since we announced our guidelines on opening up America, as we call it, we say opening up America, and we add the word again. I think we can add the word probably again, but that's what it is. We're opening up America again. 20 states representing 40% of the U.S. population have announced that they are making plans and preparations to safely restart their economies in the very near future. So that's 20 states. It's about 40% of our country. They're moving along pretty quickly. 3 announced today, as you know. And they're going to be doing it safely. They're going to be doing it with tremendous passion. They want to get back to work. The country wants to get back to work. A short time ago, the Senate passed the Paycheck Protection Program and Healthcare Enhancement Act with additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program, hospitals, and testing. A lot of money for all of them, especially for our workers and our small businesses. My administration has worked aggressively with Congress to negotiate this critical $482 billion funding package. We reached a deal that includes $382 billion in crucial small business support to keep workers on the payroll, $75 billion to aid hospitals, which really need the aid, and very badly, very proud of that, and $25 billion to support coronavirus testing efforts. I urge the House to pass the bill, and they're going to be voting on it, I imagine, very, very soon. I think while we're here, and so he's a very busy man, as you know, Secretary Mnuchin, he's going to be running back, so I thought we'll talk about that now, and we'll take a couple of questions on that, and then he can go and start phase 4 as the ink is drying. Probably they'll be voting tomorrow in the House, but shortly, and I think we have tremendous support. So, Steve, please come up, say a few words. Steve? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for all your work with us to get this passed. I'd especially like to thank Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and the entire Senate for passing this. I'd also like to thank Kevin McCarthy and Nancy Pelosi, who have been working with us round the clock as well, and our Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, who was also very instrumental in this. Let me just comment. We've had tremendous support for the PPP. This gives us another $310 billion for the PPP. We look forward to the House passing this tomorrow and being up and running quickly after that. This also gives us $50 billion for disaster loans, EIDL loans, that will allow the SBA to make $300 billion of disaster loans, all for small businesses. Also allows us, as the president said, more money to hospitals and unprecedented amount of money for testing. And again, I think we understand hospitals, not only the hospitals that have been impacted by coronavirus, but more importantly, many hospitals that have been shut down, and making sure that the doctors and nurses get money. Now, let me make just one more comment on the program. We have over 1 million companies that have received this with less than 10 workers. So there is very broad participation in really small business. I will comment, there have been some big businesses that have taken these loans. I was pleased to see that Shake Shack returned the money. We will be putting out some FAQs. There is a certification that people are making. And I ask people, just make sure the intent of this was for business that needed the money. We'll put out an FAQ. But again, the intent of this money was not for big public companies that have
The way the legislation was written, I believe it was any location based upon individual locations that had less than 500 employees. If you are a franchise, such as Shake Shack would be, typically you're not going to have 500 employees, which is why they qualified. And I mean, if we were a company and get the money, I mean, why wouldn't you? I mean, in this case, there was public outcry, and they happened to return, I believe it was $10 million. So continue, Secretary Mnuchin.
access to capital.
And not for Harvard, you might say.
So, Mr. Secretary, are you going to request that those other companies, 'cause obviously Shake Shack was not alone in being a big company that got money in this, are you going to be
I'm
asking?
going to request.
You're going to ask them to return that money?
Yep.
Yeah, I would.
Harvard's going to pay back the money, and they shouldn't be taking it. So Harvard's going to. You have a number of. I'm not going to mention any other names, but when I saw Harvard, they have one of the largest endowments anywhere in the country, maybe in the world, I guess, and they're going to pay back that money.
And I just want to clarify,
They shouldn't
because
have taken
certain people on the PPP may have not been clear in understanding the certification. So we will give people the benefit of the doubt. We're going to put an FAQ out, explain the certification. If you pay back the loan right away, you won't have liability to the SBA and to Treasury. But there are severe consequences for people who don't attest properly to this certification. And again, we want to make sure this money is available to small businesses that need it, people who have invested their entire life savings. We appreciate what's going on, and they're hiring people back.
And how are you going to ensure that those small businesses, those small restaurants, cafes, bars, who did not get the money last time around are going to get it this time?
Well, as I said, there are a million of these companies that did get it that are very small. We're working with the banks. We're extremely pleased that the small banks did great. 20% of the loans were made by banks of $1 billion and less, 60% by 20 billion and less, and the big banks also. We want everybody to participate. There's now a lot of money back in the program, and we look forward to all these small businesses getting access to funds. Brett, it's great to see you here.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Do you estimate how long this is going to take? That other pot of money obviously went quickly. Do you assume this is going to go quickly as well?
Well, let me just say, we're pleased with the success of this program and how quickly this got up operationally. We've put out more money in these SBA loans than in the last 10 years of SBA. So I want to thank all the banks that have worked really hard. We knew that when we passed this originally, if there was full takeout, we wouldn't have enough money. That's why we've worked with Congress for more money. And this is going to, we've already impacted about 30 million workers. There'll be a lot more. So we look forward to this having a big impact on the economy.
Yesterday, the president said he would look into the issue of felons, those with criminal convictions, getting access to some of these programs. I was wondering if you have an update on that.
Sure. So we worked with the White House on this. There were actually much more onerous restrictions in the SBA program. There were people who had misdemeanors that weren't allowed to access the program. It was much longer than 5 years. And, we very much, because of the criminal reform legislation that was passed and the work that's been done in the White House by Jared and others, we specifically designed the program, and the 5 years was significantly shorter than what had been done before. So we had already taken that into account.
Consideration of
For now, we're not going to do that. But I want to just emphasize, we did take this into account. There were a lot of people that wouldn't have access previously, and we changed those regulations.
Mr. Secretary, the president talked about a phase 4. I know we all understand the circumstances and why businesses need this, but how many more phases can we afford to have, or can businesses expect to have? Do you see a phase 5, a phase 6, a phase 7? What's your thinking on this?
Well, first of all, I very much appreciate the president's support for phase 4. He put out a tweet. As the president said, we would look forward to phase 4. Would be infrastructure. The president's been talking about infrastructure since the campaign. Roads, bridges, broadband, especially broadband now to rural America is very important. We've talked about incentives for restaurants, sports, entertainment, because these businesses have been impacted. The president has talked multiple times about a payroll tax cut. And we've also, we're talking about, in the case of states, we've heard from the governors and the fiscal issues of the states. I think phase 4 will most likely be what we'd need. I think based upon what we're seeing in the reopening of the economy and the amount of money we're putting in and working with the Federal Reserve on 13.3, I think you're going to see a lot of liquidity, and we look forward to business rebounding, especially later this summer.
Just real quick to follow up, and the PPP program, is this the last tranche of money you think you're going to need for small businesses?
We would expect this is the last tranche, but obviously we can always reconsider that. But this is a lot of money going out. Again, let me just be clear. It's
We've already passed, the initial bill was up to about $6.2 trillion, which if you divide by approximately 210 million adult Americans, it equates out to about 29,500 and some change. So if we were to pay it out just straight cash to every adult American, it'd be a little under $30,000. I don't know. Would that be enough to fix it? Who knows? Continue on, sir.
It's another $310 billion here and another $300 billion of loans. That's over $600 billion putting into small businesses, which are the backbone of the economy, 50% of the private payroll.
How much do you think Phase 4 will cost? And it will include all of those things?
It'd be
payroll
premature
costs?
for us to comment what the cost is. We'll work with Congress on that, and we'll consider it. Infrastructure could be a big investment.
That's going to be
Size of the taxpayer dollars that are going out the door. You fellas come to a different way of thinking about the need for oversight, independent oversight on behalf of the taxpayer.
We have independent oversight. We supported in the last legislation. Let me be very clear. We have a new inspector general. The president has already picked someone for that position. We look forward to the person being confirmed. We have an oversight committee of Congress that many of them have already been appointed. And let me just say, we put up last week for full transparency. We had no obligation to do this. We put up, you can go to treasury.gov, full transparency on the money that had been sent out on the PPP across states, showing all the big lenders, how it was distributed. No one lender did more than 4%, showed the businesses. So again, the president and I very much believe in full transparency. We're spending a lot of money, and we want to make sure that it's done effectively and fairly.
Secretary, thank you. You started by thanking the leaders in the House and the Senate. Can you tell us more about how easy or hard it was to deal with both sides?
Well, we've been working around the clock. I think there's been very good bipartisan support to get this done. The Congress is coming together, understanding the importance of this, and we've been working around the clock for days. So,
I believe Democrats have put forth a plan to basically pay every American, or maybe adult American, $2,000 a month until basically this crisis has passed. Maybe there was some refinement there. Apparently that's not specifically what's coming out right now, but continue, sir.
This is important legislation. It was a lot. We spoke to a lot of people. Mark Meadows has been fantastic, as I said. It's great to have him here in the White House. I couldn't have done this without him working on this with me, and the president and vice president have been available to us around the clock. So this was a big team effort.
Collaboration of the Democrats?
Absolutely. We couldn't have done this today without unanimous consent and the Democrats being on board, and we look forward to this being passed on a bipartisan basis tomorrow. This is a real example of the country coming together to fight this virus.
What is your best understanding of what Mitch McConnell wants from an infrastructure package?
Again, I think we're not at the point of designing that. Like every other bill, we will work with senators on both sides on a bipartisan basis. I can tell you there's a lot of support, particularly for things like broadband and especially what's going on today. But the president has talked about, I was on the campaign with the president, we've been talking about bridges and tunnels and rebuilding this country for years. So the president wants to make a big investment in this.
This is Mitch McConnell.
Mr. Secretary, what will we see the $17 billion portion of CARES reserved for companies deemed critical for national security? And also, will oil companies fit into that at all, per the president's tweet?
So we're in the process of putting out guidance. That part was really designed for national security companies that are either major suppliers to the Department of Defense or companies that have top secret clearance. So that national security provision was very clear when we did that. The president has asked me to work with the Secretary of Energy. Obviously, the energy business is very important to us. This has national security issues, but different. And we look forward to both looking at what existing capabilities we have, and that will be something we may need to go back to Congress and get additional funding for.
Similar.
Because, I mean, if folks weren't aware, apparently yesterday for the first time ever, oil went negative. I believe it dropped down to about negative $37 a barrel due to a lot of storage facilities filling up, and literally the transfer between the contract as well, basically for oil futures there. Essentially, at least the way it looked, is that oil suppliers were going to pay people to take oil off their hands because they didn't have that supply capacity or the storage capacity there. Continue, sir.
To the airplane or airline bailout at all, or was that different?
Completely different situation. I mean, what you have with the airlines is, we had a very, very good airline industry. Because of the virus, they basically shut down. We have a situation now with the oil business, partially because of the virus, okay, for less demand, but partially also because of too much supply. But, the president is determined. We want to maintain our energy independence, and the president has asked me to look at all of our options, and we're doing that. Obviously, it's a pretty extraordinary situation where you saw the front month of oil futures trade negative.
Hi, on the issue of the fourth stimulus bill and aid to state and local governments, any thoughts on whether that money should be proportionate to the rate of infection in states so that harder hit states?
Interesting, but way too early to consider that. Whatever we do, we'll do on a bipartisan basis. The president has listened to the governors. I've had the opportunity to be on multiple video conference calls with the president and the vice president. We're reaching out to a lot of people. There's a lot of states that have been impacted, but way too early to figure out that level of design.
You mentioned if a large company applies for one of these loans and maybe manipulates or works the system or works the loopholes to get it, what are some of the consequences to, if a large company tries to get one of these PPP loans? What can you do?
Well, you used the word manipulate. I'm going to give people the benefit of the doubt. Again, we're going to put up very clear guidance so that people understand what the certification is, what it means if you're a big company. Again, there is a provision for, where there are multiple affiliates that people can access this, but the intent was not for companies that have access to plenty of liquidity and other sources. And again, if to the extent these companies didn't understand this and they repay the loans, that will be okay. And if not, there'll be potentially other consequences.
Can you talk about what those consequences could be?
Again, you can look at the certifications. They're quite significant.
Do you have an estimate of how many jobs have been saved with all the money that's gone out in PPP so far?
Well, I can tell you the PPP so far is over 30 million jobs. And again, that doesn't account for other money that we've sent out. And again, we're very pleased. The direct deposits have gone out. We've started sending out the checks. We're also going to be supplementing our capability and sending prepaid debit cards so we can get money out quickly to people. So everything that the president has had us working on is providing significant stability in the economy while we're dealing with this difficult time when, for medical reasons, we've closed down major parts of the economy. Thank you very much.
That was a very nice question. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr.
Steve.
President.
See you later. That was a nice question, actually. It's a good question, too.
All right. So basically, we had the president come out. He basically just reiterated that we're worrying about the country, but we need to get it back open again. We need to do it in a responsible way as well. And as we saw there, we had Secretary Mnuchin, the head of the Treasury there, answering questions about the Paycheck Protection Program as well. The Senate has just recently passed another addendum to it, basically increased the money available there. The House is likely going to vote on that tomorrow. We're going to have to see how it all works out as well. Just wanted to get you folks the initial reaction and President's comments there. And the link's down in the doobly-doo below if you'd like to continue watching and everything, but just wanted to cover the initial remarks there at today's Coronavirus Task Force briefing. So thank you all for watching. Peace out, everybody. Stay safe, and long live the elbow bump.